So hope everyone's having a great TTRA. So I'm Ian Ross, and just a quick show of hands, how many folks in this room are familiar with Placer AI? Have seen it, have seen a demo? Yeah, not so many. Great. Yeah, we're new here, and we're new to TTRA, and this has actually been an awesome first experience for me. I lead our civic vertical, which is everything from government, economic development, travel, tourism, right down to your local main streets. And for those of you who don't know what Placer AI is, what I'd like to do in 3 or 4 minutes is basically, it's just a terrible idea. I'm going to do a quick live demo of it, which will totally be, it's just going to be a terrible, terrible idea. Was anybody at DMA West in Salt Lake? Anybody in the room? No. All right. So I tried it there too. So basically, the funny thing is about a live demo, there's basically 3 ways that it can totally fail. And the first one is that for some reason the platform goes down, right? Placer AI goes down. I mean, I suppose it could happen. The second one is that the Wi-Fi doesn't work, because I'm going to be live on live Wi-Fi. Now, so my request to you is, since we're in a glass and concrete building in a windowless room and sort of mediocre Wi-Fi signal right now, that if you're like streaming live your kid's soccer game right now, because I'm not all that exciting, if you could do it on some version of a dedicated Wi-Fi network and sort of like leave the main one, that would be awesome. That's the second one. I guess those are the only 2 reasons. And now that I think about it, the first reason is if the platform goes down, but I'll never tell you that. I'll just blame the Wi-Fi, right? If the platform fails, I'll be like, well, it must be the Wi-Fi. So in a nutshell, Placer is location data. And a lot of you in the travel tourism industry are using location data, which is why we're here. But it's a little bit different, I think, than probably what you're used to seeing. Placer grew up as a company just a handful of years ago. It's only been live for 3 years, really. We have a number of clients in this room. I think we're working with about 50 DMOs currently, and about 500 now, and 20 civic clients who are, cities and counties and economic development groups and chambers. And but that's just a very small sliver of Placer's business. Placer grew up in the sort of commercial real estate and retail and finance and airports, and we're just now learning the travel tourism industry. So if I appear like I know less about it than everybody else who's here, that's because I do. And really thrilled to be here to learn. That's a big part of what we're doing here. But I'm going to show you right now, and I'm going to try to do it in like 2 or 3 minutes, how it works and how a number of DMOs are using it. And this is a live drive, so let's hope it goes pretty well. So the way Placer works, it's really, really quite simple. We geofence the entire United States, everything. So you can just go onto it like a map and click on anything. So you can click on the Four Seasons Hotel, you can click on the Starbucks across the street, or you can click on your entire destination and say, here's St. Louis. Or if you have an event and it just occupies a little corner of your park, you can just go in there and draw it. You can say, okay, just this little piece of the park where the farmer's market happens. Set the date for whatever you want and run a report. And the report will give you everything from how many people attended the event, where they come from, what else they did while they were in town, which restaurants they went to, which hotels they stay at, what they like to do, who they are, demographics. Everything you could possibly want to know about a visitor is in that report. And it's just live. You just sort of click on it, right? So what I thought I would do, and this is when things probably go wrong, is what I did this morning is I just drew this little box. So that's where the arch is, right? I went for a run there yesterday morning, fantastic. I thought, I'll just draw this little box. So I just drew the box, here's the arch and the little, here in St. Louis. And then I ran a report. Now I ran the report for the last 12 months, but what's cool about Placer is you can just run it for any day you want. And our data starts January 1, 2017, right? So you can see anything you want to see about visitors starting in 2017. You can benchmark it then, or whatever makes sense, pre-COVID, January 2020, when everything went off the rails. And see how recovery is occurring, right? So that's one of the cool things. And the second thing I did is I just set it for visitors, right? As opposed to, look, let's face it, there aren't a lot of residents or employees that live under the arch, maybe a couple. But I set it for visitors, but you can always look at residents or employees of a given location. And then I decided that I'm gonna make sure that my visitors had a home distance greater than a certain number. So I can define who I want to be looking at from a visitation standpoint, right? And then, but let's just run it for the last 12 months. What you'll see is there were 1.8 million visits to that little box that I drew. And you can do this again for anything, a beachfront, your local grocery store, whatever you want to say. And then it showed me the visit trend over that last 12 months, which you can see here, and I can see, okay, we sort of peaked here, July 4th weekend, that would come as no surprise, and I can, look at that, how I'm doing month over month, year over year, going back. And then I can, once I now know, how many people there are, I can learn a little bit about them, and this is based on the home location of the device. Probably should have started with that. Placer pulls the latitude and longitude pings out of mobile devices, and we're observing the movement of about 35 million of them every moment of every day. And we do this through a proprietary panel that we build with apps that we're partnered with, right? So it's all mobile location data, right? And then once you know the home locations of those devices and the work locations, you can sort of tell a story about who lives there down to the zip code and census block level. So here are the folks that visited the Arch, and once you know how many folks there are to a given place, it's cool to know where else they went. So this is our little spider graph that sort of shows exactly where those people were before, right? They went to that PY I'm looking at, and after, right? And then we can do that. We have, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these locations, just once you get down to the percentages, right? They were at the riverfront, they were at the Hilton, they were at the cafe, they were at Edward Jones, that's curious. And then where they went immediately after. And if you're interested in sort of finding, let's say, if you're interested in knowing who these folks are, like let's say you're thinking about a sponsor for an event or something, you can find out what their favorite brands are, but you can also find out exactly, if you're thinking about the sort of ROI of bringing people here are the places that they went, right? So when they were in town visiting the Arch, they went to the ballpark, they went to the airport, of course, right? They went to the park, St. Louis Galleria, O'Hare. So you can see all the places that people to any given location went, and I can organize this by category. So if I was really curious just about where they ate, I might click on dining and just say, hey, where did the people that went to the Arch, where did they eat? And then here's your answers, right? And this is all exportable. So now you know how many folks went to any location and where else they went, right? Which is called journey. Now, it'd be really cool to know where they come from, right? So here's your trade area. So you can see these dots represent the home locations of these devices, right? And I can pan this out and look at the entire US, and I can see where people came from who visited any location I'm interested in. And again, I drew the Arch, or the little grassy area under the Arch, but you could draw anything you want, a hotel in town, your entire city. It's all totally up to you, the location and the time frame you look at. It's all just customizable. So here's the home locations of the folks that we're looking at, and here it is broken down by zip code in case you're thinking about marketing or how you're performing in different zip codes. You can see those home locations just by zip code, and if you want to organize it by census block, because that's how your organization works, you can do it that way too. So okay, now we know how many folks, all right, where else they went, and where they came from. Learn a little something about them. So based on the home locations, we run about I don't know how many dozens now of data sets, and I thought it'd be fun to look at what's called AGS, behavior, and what you can find is that the folks are pretty into they're trendy fashionistas, right? We're sort of over-indexed for that. You can compare the nation or the state. It's all about the look, hairstyle, adventures, dress to impress. You start to get the psychographic breakdown. In fact, I can go look at their brands, and I can tell you if they are interested in Lululemon or Athletica. Really, based on their devices and how often they visit these different brands in different locations. So I can learn a whole bunch about them. I can even learn their spending habits. Do they spend on matcha? Do they spend on lattes? Do they spend on smoothies? What are they into, right? So now I can learn that we're pretty over-indexed for vegetarians, right? Which is interesting, and even bubbly drinkers. Good to know. Maybe a champagne fest under the Arch makes sense. The next thing I can learn about them is actually is something called Persona Live. This is really fantastic. This is what they're interested in social media, and then they're grouped into behavioral groups, right? So you can see that the folks visiting the Arch were young professionals, Hispanic families, ultra-wealthy families, way over-indexed, super under-indexed for rural high income and rural low income, and small town low income. If you want to know something about who those folks are, here's the breakdown. In fact, what you see at the top is a live ticker of what they're tweeting about. Right? The home locations of the people who visited the Arch, this is a live ticker, so they hashtag Steven Spielberg, hashtag Canadian wildfires, hashtag nature photography. This is a live ticker of the visitors based on their home location over the last 12 months. So this is sort of what you want to know about them, right? Everything from their channel preferences and their web visitation, right? And then, so I think I'm in 4.5 minutes now. That's kind of a snapshot of what Placer does. Again, it just starts with a map, and you can click on anything you want, save it into your profile, right? Visit Dallas here, they put a bunch of their POIs in. You can put an unlimited number of POIs in and check it out. And if you want to know kind of more your traditional visitor behavior in a dashboard style, so you can export it to your boards or whomever you're working with, here's a version of that, just another tab. I just pulled up St. Louis a minute ago. And you set your time frame, right? 2.2 million visitors, how many visitor overnights, the home CBSAs, the average incomes of those CBSAs, these are the home locations, right, the origins, visitor metrics, breakdown by visit length, demographics, et cetera, et cetera. So again, we're pretty new into the travel tourism space. This is just the quickest little snapshot that you can see of Placer AI. This was the slide I just built. This is, by the way, this is a shout out for the guys in the back. I put this slide in just in case, but it was really cool that it worked. So thanks. So with that, I'm Ian, and we have a booth out here. This was the slideshow I just threw together just in case everything fails. But the live drive went okay. We do have a booth out there, and if you want to pull up a POI that's important to you, or a location that you're working with, or just for the university students, if there's something you want to look at, again, think of it, it's just a map. And you click on any location, you can see all that data I just shared with you. So thanks very much. Thanks for a wonderful TTRA, and we're really glad to be part of the community. Thank you. So appreciate it. So I just want to call up Sarah Dornachar. She's the next person to join the podium. Thank you, Sarah.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming to the morning session. This is very exciting for me. It's the first time out of Australia, well, the first time to the US since COVID. So it's my first post-COVID TTRA, and it's my first keynote to actual humans, not a computer screen. So I'm excited and nervous and everything, so just absolutely fantastic to be here. Let me get that clicker. In the program, you saw the title was Leveraging Smart Technology, and it didn't quite tell you what for, and it's for environmental sustainability. So that's what we'll be talking about today. It's primarily about sustainability, but it's also about how technology can supercharge our efforts to make the tourism industry more sustainable. So what's the starting point and the challenge of all of these? That's my favorite quote from the UN Secretary General. We are on a highway to climate hell with the foot still on the accelerator. It just gives you such a good picture of the situation we find ourselves in. And of course, tourism plays a big role in, kind of in causing the challenge, but potentially also offering a solution. I don't need to tell you how important tourism is. We are important to nations, communities, families. We create jobs, we create GDP, but it comes at a quite substantial environmental cost, and we don't talk so much about that on a regular basis. So as an industry, we're the 5th most polluting industry of all industries. We generate 8% of CO2 emissions, contributing up to 12.5% to global heating. For every night we're staying at this hotel, we use 300 liters of water. And that's not because we're showering excessively, but by the time we fill the pool and we water the plants and we do the laundry, that's what it amounts to. And we generate 35 million tons of waste every single year. So a lot of potential for improvement. And how can we address the challenge? Well, the IPCC said we need to change behavior. And this is actually a good statistic, because if that's true, we can reduce carbon emissions by up to 70% with behavioral change. Yeah? But behavioral change is not trivial to achieve. Yet, that's what we are trying to do. And when I say we, it's not only our research group at the University of Queensland, but there's quite a few groups nationally in Australia, in the US, internationally that work on that. So it's a collective effort, and much of what I talk about will showcase the work of different research groups. So what we want to do is we want to change tourist behavior. You could argue, of course, we need to change government behavior because they could impose laws and regulate tourism industry. But our focus is really on changing tourist behavior. And you can imagine how complicated that is, right? Because a tourist on holiday is not precisely the perfect target group to entice to become environmentally sustainable. But that's what we want to do. We want to develop effective, theory-informed practical measures. Now, theory-informed, I say that quite deliberately because I will not talk much about theory in my talk, but I need you to know how important theory is. Because if we try different practical measures to make tourists behave more sustainably, and we don't understand the underlying mechanism, the theory, then it's just trial and error, right? And that's not a very effective way to create knowledge. So theory is important because we inform any practical measure we develop by theory, and once we know which theory, which mechanism works, we can create many more effective practical measures to address our challenge. So we want to develop effective theory-informed practical measures that help tourism businesses and destinations entice tourists to behave more sustainably. Now, I deliberately use the word entice because what you see in most hotels is not enticing, right? You go to the bathroom, you see a sign that tells you what an environmental vandal you are if you're not going to reuse your towel. It gives you all the environmental facts. That's not enticing. That's guilt-tripping tourists into environmental sustainability, right? So that's not what we try to do. We try to entice them in a slightly more charming way to behave in a more sustainable manner. We do not want to undermine guest satisfaction. I don't need to tell you that, but guest satisfaction is everything. So if we work with a hotel and we say, yeah, we can improve your sustainability dramatically, but your guest satisfaction is going to drop, the hotel is going to say, no chance, not even talking, not even considering it. Yeah? And we do not want to cause extra expense to the tourism businesses. Again, really important to achieve uptake. If anything, we want to save businesses money. We do not want to create more cost. So that requires field experimentation, and that's not something we do very often in the social sciences generally or tourism specifically, and it sounds like something that's more out of a chemistry lab, right? But it's not. It's actually, field experimentation can happen in any discipline, and tourism is a great place for field experimentation. What does field experimentation mean? We start with a status quo. So we need to measure the environmental sustainability of a destination, a business, a nation as the baseline, as the starting point. So in my case, for example, we would want to know the water use, the electricity use in a tourism business. Optimally, that's where technology comes in. We want to do that automatically. I will show you a few examples today where we manually measured it. It's expensive, it's tedious, it's error-prone, it's just not a good way to do it. So technology is the way to go. We want to measure the status quo using technology. Then we introduce an intervention. We put in place a practical measure that we believe, based on theory, is going to be effective in improving environmental sustainability. So again, not random, but theory-informed practical interventions, we believe for a certain reason that they should work. And once we put the intervention in, we then have a second measurement, optimally again using technology, where we can determine whether we were successful at improving sustainability. Now, importantly in field experimentation, much in contrast to survey studies, which still dominate data collection in tourism research, is we need this to happen over 3 points in time. So the first point in time is our baseline measurement to find out where we're standing. The second point in time is when we introduce the intervention, the practical measure. And the third point in time is when we test whether we have been successful in improving the situation. So that's the structure of field experiments. And I'm going to show you a few examples. I hope you will find some of them fascinating. The important thing is, once we know these things work, we can roll them out to any business, right? They're not unique to the particular businesses where they were tested. And I will also point out to you which of them use technology and which don't use technology in data collection, and briefly which theoretical basis we use. So towel reuse is the single most researched topic in sustainability in tourism. This is a legendary paper conducted in an American hotel. The aim was to improve uptake, so more reuse of towels. And the psychological mechanism used is commitment. That's turning out increasingly to be exceptionally powerful as a theoretical basis. So what did this group of researchers do? They asked people at reception to commit to reuse towels. And the most effective approach of doing that is to give them a little pin. So they were running around the hotel with their little pin that demonstrated their commitment, made it publicly visible that they were committed to reusing the towel. So that little intervention, you can see the cost is practically nothing, reduced towel use by 40%. Massive cost saving for the hotel, zero impact on guest satisfaction. They couldn't care less. They were proudly running around with their pin. And you see, I'm just putting that in there because I want to really emphasize the theory. So this little symbol there means social norms. So the theory that was leveraged here is social norms. We are social animals. So we run around and we show off our pin because we are doing the right thing, right? So that is the theoretical mechanism that drives the behavior change. And this is manual measurement. So not very sophisticated. We need to beg the hotel for data about, all guest satisfaction and towers and all these things. So maybe it's semi-automatic. We're not counting the towers personally, but it's not automatic. It's still error-prone. Another legendary study in towel reuse is actually even simpler than our little pin. It's just this sign. Again, it sounds like a sign that wasn't designed with a lot of care, but it was designed with a lot of care. Because what it does, again, it uses social norms, right? So it tells us that if you are in this particular room, that's really important. They have different conditions. And it's specifically when you give the social norm for that particular room that people react to this. So most people who are in this room reuse their towels. 44% increase in towel reuse just as a response to that sign. No impact on guest satisfaction. Again, we're leveraging social norms. And again, we have to manually measure all these towels that we've been using. Reducing room cleaning, that's when we take it to the next level, because we basically say, well, it's not just about the towels. Why not just cut the whole room clean? And you're going to say, that's not new, Sarah. It's not new. Most hotels do it, right? They give you a voucher, some loyalty points, a drink, all sorts of things. But interestingly, the hotels will never tell you how much they've saved in room cleaning. Yeah? So we don't know the effectiveness, and we don't understand the theoretical mechanism. So the study we conducted here in a beautiful Slovenian hotel was aiming at enticing consumers to voluntarily waive their room cleaning. The base level of room opting out, when you just put the sign out, because you can always do that, is 3%. So it's very little, right? Not very much uptake at all. So the first thing we do, and here I want to emphasize the importance of qualitative research. First, we need to figure out what's going on, right? Why are people not doing this more? And it turns out that they're very cynical. When the hotel asks them to waive the room clean, the guest says, well, why should I? I've paid the room rate, why should I? There's no benefit. It's not really for the environment. The hotel is just doing it because they want to save money. Yeah? So leveraging that sentiment, what we tried was an intervention where we communicated to guests exactly the cost saving for the hotel, and we said, let's go halves. How about we, the hotel, save half, and the other half we will give you back in the form of a drinks voucher you can use at the hotel. So this intervention reduced room cleaning by 42%. And not only did it do that, but even the most serious hotel guests love a free drink, right? So guest satisfaction was not negatively impacted. If anything, it went up, and there was a very lively black market for drinks vouchers at the hotel. Now, what's extra interesting is we added one more condition in our experiment. We told them about the environmental implications. You note, until now, there was no talk about the environment. We just said, we save money, how about we go halves? Then we had one more condition where we added a little environmental information. We said, oh, this is great, because in fact, for this hotel, every room clean takes 1.5 kilowatt hours of electricity, 35 liters of water, 100 milliliters of chemicals. So that's quite an environmental impact. So we add that information and give them the big environmental spiel, and what do you think happens? Absolutely nothing. All right? So it's all about the drinks voucher, it's all about the sharing. That's where the impact comes from. It does not come from the fact that we're telling them what it does for the environment. That's an important insight, because still it is that approach we mainly take in trying to entice people to behave more sustainably. So what's the theory here? That's my little symbol for enjoyment, so very, very happy people. So it's enjoyment, which is a very rarely used theoretical framework to date, and something I think we need to do a lot more in tourism, because we are in the enjoyment business after all, right? So if we can increase enjoyment, that's a really good, strong leverage point. And again, we had to manually measure all the dependent variables for this study. All right, what else? Reducing room cleaning can be even cheaper simply by changing the default. Now, you would have all heard the term nudging, right? It's very funky and trendy, and everyone wants to nudge. What nudging is we change choice architecture. We change the environment in which people make decisions. So here we go to a business hotel, 3-star city business hotel, quite different setting from the previous hotel, and we change the default. So the default before our intervention is the hotel cleans the room every day by default. You can put the sign out if you don't want the room cleaned. We change it over and we say, well, how about we don't clean the room every day? But if you put the sign out, we're very happy to clean it, and there is no surcharge, right? So there's no penalty or no incentive to do the right or the wrong thing. We're just changing the default. So just put the sign out and we'll clean it, no problem. 63% reduction in room cleaning, no impact on guest satisfaction. Of course, they're business travelers, right? Like they frankly don't care, they're not much in the room anyway. So very simple way, very cheap intervention for very big cost savings and big environmental gain. What are we using here? Choice architecture. Nudging is the theoretical framework, and again, we had to manually measure all the dependent variables. Moving on to another big area. This is a really big area because food, producing it, everything to disposing it, is about 26% of all carbon emissions on the planet. And of course, tourism hospitality, again, plays a big role, right? We have lots of beautiful buffets where what people like to do is overfill the plate as much as they possibly can and then not eat up. And everything that's left behind is called plate waste, and that's environmentally pretty detrimental. So there's been quite a bit of research on how we can reduce plate waste at buffets, and I've just selected a few to share with you. This one is, I like this one a lot, but it's a bit of a sledgehammer approach. What's going on? Wrong button, this one. So there's a little bit of an attempt to talk about the environment at the beginning by this research group, cherish the earth, treasure each food. But what then we really come to the bottom line, which is we'll give you a 20% discount if you eat up, right? That's why I call it a sledgehammer approach, right? I don't think that the first two sentences were very important in this intervention. And sure enough, we reduced plate waste by 76% as a result. And every food provider has to decide whether the cost goes down or not, right? You have to calculate how much money you lose in the discount and how much you save by not throwing all that food away. But very, very effective approach, no impact on guest satisfaction. Actually, this is wrong. They say that it is beliefs they're changing. So in the paper, they say it's actually the environmental appeal that has the impact. I've taken the liberty to disagree. I think this is pure enjoyment, right? I think this is all the effect is coming out of the enjoyment. And again, manual measurement of plate waste. All right, if you don't want to give people 20% discount and you find yourself in a family hotel, you can do something totally different. You can entice families to eat up by introducing a game. Everyone who's got kids knows stamp and stickers, right? Stamps and stickers. You want the kids to do something, stamps and stickers. So that's exactly what we did in this little study. You can see the hotel down there. It's at the Slovenian coast. It's very much a family hotel. And if you've ever seen kids at the buffet, that is next level, right? Like they just grab absolutely everything, not thinking about what might happen if they can't eat it. So a target group was families, and here is the very trivial intervention we used. It's a 1 A4 piece of paper, and for every day the waiter gave them a stamp if the whole table ate up. That was only possible in that hotel because although there is a food buffet and people go and take food, each table has an assigned waiter, and the waiter does the drinks. So there's the connection between the waiter. So at the end of the meal, the kids can say, look, we ate up, give us our stamp, right? And if they had stamps for the whole stay, at checkout, they got a little prize for all their hard work. So this little intervention reduced plate waste by 38% among families. That was specifically for the family segment. And talk about happy children. Right? There was definitely no sacrifice in guest satisfaction. Kids loved it. In fact, not only the kids, the parents and grandparents loved it because this is Central Europe, very much, eat up what's on your plate is very much the family mantra anyway, so that worked beautifully in with the family. So this is a classic enjoyment driven. So the theoretical foundation is we're going in an enjoyment context, a family holiday, and we reckon the best chance we have is if we further increase the enjoyment, if they do the correct behavior, we will have really good success. So we have increased enjoyment by introducing a game, and that worked really well. But we manually measured, and here I want to just take an extra minute to explain this to you, just to understand how insanely complicated this is. So basically over 2 months, we're paying a human being, a research assistant, to stand in the kitchen, and the waiters come in with the plates, and the research assistant splits out the edible and the non-edible food, and weighs it, and notes it, right? So you can only imagine why there's not many of these kinds of studies. It is literally unaffordable, right? It's just too expensive, too labor intensive. And what I'm not going to tell you today is the many times my experiments failed. Yeah, so you invest all the time, and it doesn't always work. Yeah, so very, very inefficient way to push knowledge forward and to develop effective means of changing how our industry operates. All right, now this is a great study. I don't know the authors. Actually, I'm their fan club, and I've never met them. Maybe once I will. They ran a study across 52 hotels in Scandinavia, and they tested 2 different interventions. One of them is this little table sign. Again, you think about it, the table sign costs all of $1 maybe. Welcome back and again, and visit our buffet many times. That's better than taking a lot at once. Again, at first glance, it looks like just a sign. Someone came up with a slogan. But it's actually more sophisticated than that. Because what it realizes out of qualitative research, I want to again and again emphasize, qualitative research explains to us or helps us generate ideas how the world operates, right? And quant tests whether indeed it operates that way. So these guys found out that a buffet is a social situation. So people are embarrassed to go back to the buffet 5 times because it makes them look greedy. So they think it's much more socially acceptable to go and take a lot at once, because then they don't have to go back again and again. So what does the sign do? The sign attacks that very sentiment and says, no, actually, the social norm in this dining room is different. If you overfill, that does not look good, but we love to see people going back. So they've reprogrammed the social norm of expectations in the dining room. And so that little sign reduced plate waste by 21%, no impact on guest satisfaction. So it's social norms we're leveraging as the theoretical construct, and again, manual measurement. So 52 hotels had to manually record their plate waste for this study to be implemented. Even better is the second part of this study, where they did a much simpler thing. They reduced the plate size. They reduced the plate size by 3 centimeters and reduced plate waste by 20%. Yeah? That's a classic choice architecture approach. So we just change the infrastructure, and we can achieve fantastic improvements without impact on guest satisfaction. Why? Because it doesn't matter, they can go 5 times and they're not going to leave hungry, right? We're not limiting their freedom as to how much they eat. We're just making it a little bit harder to do this crazy overfilling thing. I was once doing observations at a Hilton hotel, very fancy hotel in Australia. And seriously, their plates, they changed them since, but their plates were like salad bowls. You know, it's this classic fancy restaurant thing where you have a salad bowl and then there's like half a cucumber and the tomato there, and it's very expensive. So they had these massive salad bowls. And if you sit in there and you observe, you think, goodness me, how can people even pack so much in and carry it to the table? They would just fill the whole thing up. It's quite remarkable. So if you make it a little bit harder for people to display that behavior, it has a huge impact on, and of course the cost, right? I'm not talking dollars here, but you can only imagine that all translates in food they don't need to buy, they don't need to prepare, they don't need to pay for disposal. All right, but again, all manual measurements for these studies. A few more things moving, because you will see there's very few studies in other behaviors. It's all towel reuse mainly, and a few other things. Plate waste is getting increasingly interesting. This was a fun one, because when we debriefed with one of our Slovenian hotels, and we asked the hotel, is there anything else you think we could improve? The food and beverage manager said, serviettes. And we went, what do you mean serviettes? And it's exactly the serviettes that are in front of you. Those beautiful, white, thick cotton serviettes. And the food and beverage manager said, they're a disaster. The moment the guest touches it, I need to wash it, I need to iron it. And after 70 times, I need to throw it away. So we went and calculated it, and it's really true. It's actually environmentally, counterintuitively so, worse than having a single-use recycled, a lot worse, 3 times worse than a single-use recycled serviette. So what we did is we changed the default in the dining room. That's not a boat, that's a serviette. So we changed it from fancy white serviettes to recycled paper serviettes. So when they come to the breakfast buffet, they find recycled paper serviettes. The director of the hotel was very nervous because, again, that's a very nice hotel. So the director went, I don't want to ruin my image. So what we had to do is put a little sign on the table explaining why that was the serviette that was being provided. And the other thing we did is we had those fancy white serviettes at the buffet. So if someone felt incredibly passionate about his cotton serviette, they could go to the buffet and they could get it from the buffet. So this little default change, so we're back in nudging territory, in choice architecture territory, reduced the use of cotton serviettes by 95%. The hotel guest could not care less, genuinely, right? So absolutely zero impact on guest satisfaction. So theory, choice architecture change, and manual measurement, but this was really simple to measure because on a normal day, you use as many serviettes as they're paying guests, right? And then for our intervention, we just counted the few serviettes that disappeared from the buffet. All right, water. Oh no, I have some water. There's 2 cool water studies, and I hope there will be more. The nice thing about the water studies, they're the only ones so far that now move away from manual measurement, and they do automatic measurement. And that just makes it much more viable to test different things. So this first study looks at hot water, because it's about reducing electricity use. And they use a little, so it's in shower specifically, and they use a little display. It's not a full computer in the shower. It's just a little, it's a little thing that plugs onto the shower hose. And it measures, actually it's really cool because it uses the pressure of the water through the hose to generate the electricity for the measurement device to operate. So very cool. Anyway, it measures the water, but it also can display things to guests. So they had a control condition where they just displayed the water temperature. And then they had a condition where they displayed the liters of water flowing through as they were taking a shower. And when they had the liters of water displayed, that reduced not shower time, but hot water use by 11%. Yeah? No communicating about environment, no preaching, nobody feels guilty or not guilty. You're just watching as the liters are trickling through as you're showering. No impact on guest satisfaction. So this is again choice architecture as the theoretical underpinning, and now we're moving to automatic measurement. And that's where things get exciting, because you can see once you have that tool that measures things automatically, you could try a different thing every month at no cost. So we can really do large-scale field experimentation and achieve change. Another study went all in for the whole bathroom, and they had analog meters at the water pipe to measure. And they used, again, commitment. So that's one that's really one to look out for. I think that's increasingly coming out as a real winner. So lots of talking. And at the end, you see, will you help us? Are you committing to water reuse in the hotel? And that little commitment reduced water use by 16%. And that translates to 85 liters per night per guest. So not a lot for just a little paper sign that people agree and commit to. No impact on guest satisfaction. This is again social norms, right? We are a community. Will you help? Will you commit to the community to do the right thing? And automatic measurement with a water meter at the pipe. All right, something different, just 2 more, then I'm done. In case you're getting bored of all these field experiments, there's 54 of them. I'm not going to talk through all the 54. So this is interesting because it's a bit different. It's now we're in the web interface, and it's conducted by a colleague of mine, Jorge Arana, in Spain. Spain has a subsidized holiday program for retired people. So they can go and they can look at different holiday options and book something. So what Jorge did is each holiday option had a certain CO2 emissions value, right? And then he did different things in the web interface to try to entice these retired people to choose the lowest emissions holiday. And the one that worked best, oh, that's my old person, and this is the one that worked best. So there were multiple conditions, but there were 2 movie conditions. One movie condition was, an official UN or World Wildlife Fund video that tells you about all the environmental aspects. This was a little Spanish girl who talked about her future. And that just worked beautifully and significantly reduced the CO2 emissions chosen by these senior citizens for their holidays. So wonderful experiment, just shows you how everything else was in the hotel. I wanted to broaden it. So this is, all these interventions can be done by hotels, destinations, booking online web booking companies, right, can influence how we make our travel choices. So social norm, right? It's a collective responsibility to future generations. And again, manual measurement, but of course much easier than my plate waste because we can look at the clicks and the bookings online. And the final one, I'm moving away from the tourist as the target group because I like this study so much, I wanted to share it with you, and we're going in the kitchen. And we're trying to reduce food preparation waste, so kitchen waste, kitchen food waste. Very simple choice architecture intervention. The researchers replaced big, intransparent waste bins with transparent, smaller ones. And that little change reduced food waste in the kitchen by 73%. And why? What were the mechanisms? First of all, the staff is too lazy to empty the bin. So if the bin is small, they'd have to go more often, right? So they just don't throw as much away. And the fact that it's transparent means that the supervisor sees what they throw away. So if there's, half a perfectly fine cucumber in the bin, then the boss says, well, why are you throwing this away? So there's a regulation process of what's actually being thrown away. But in terms of the intervention, we're just replacing a bin, right? And we achieve a 73% in improvement. So there you go, that's all the experiments. So that's choice architecture and manual measurement. And now we get to the technology side of things. So I hope you've seen in these examples that all these field experimentation, if we measure things manually, is super labor expensive, super slow to implement, super expensive to run, and it leads to random knowledge generation because we can't do it constantly at many outlets. But every single experiment is this 3-year effort, right? So we have these little random pockets of knowledge creation around the world, and that's not a very effective way to create knowledge. Technology can supercharge. Supercharge are offered. So I'll show you 2 examples of how we can supercharge it. The first one is a study by Oscar, who I think is back there, my PhD student at the University of Queensland. And he, like many other PhD students, is the COVID generation of students, right? Very sad generation because unlike us, they couldn't go to conferences. They couldn't go to field sites. Everything was closed. So Oscar wanted to reduce plate waste at a hotel, but all hotels in Australia were shut. So there is no field site. But we had technology. So we wired up a hotel in China that was still operational, and we wired it up with one device that was a scale. So we were automatically measuring whenever something was dumped in the bin, we got a new measurement. And the second thing we measured is the number of people entering the dining room. So we were sitting in Australia, and in a hotel in China, we were measuring plate waste per person per day at the buffet, and that was exactly what we wanted to reduce. So then Oscar went and he thought about what theory would be useful to reduce plate waste, and he used this one. Now, very few of us can read it, I can't, but it's about a Chinese poem that all children learn at school, and it's about respecting the hard work of farmers. And what Oscar tried to trigger was empathy for farmers in the hope that that would lead to the reduced food waste. The other one, again, you could say is maybe more of a sledgehammer approach, is the chairman's endorsement of a grassroots campaign, which is called the Clean Plate campaign. So the Chinese people started this campaign. They wanted to reduce plate waste. And the chairman at some point endorsed it, and that's the exact endorsement quote. So Oscar goes and first does a survey study to see whether he was triggering the right psychological constructs. And sadly, our farmers dropped out. Everyone loved the poem, but it didn't trigger the emotional reaction we wanted it to trigger, but the chairman was very effective. So we used the chairman then in the field experiment, put the table sign on in the dining room, and here's the result. So the baseline, the blue line, is the plate waste per person per day without the sign, and the red line is the plate waste per person per day with the sign. Overall, that means a 7% reduction in plate waste. When we submitted the paper, reviewer said, well, that's not very much, right? Well, maybe 7 doesn't sound like much, but actually it's a lot. If you think about reducing 7% of your food waste every single day of your life across every hotel in China, that is a pretty big impact. And again, the cost is a 10-cent sign, right? So very good return on investment here. And the second example is that's where it gets really cool, because that's where the technology is not only here to measure, but it's also here to actually proactively change the behavior. So if you talk to hotels, especially smaller hotels, and there's plenty of them, their biggest problem is air conditioning and heating. Super expensive. Yeah? Guests come in, crank up the aircon, have it running for the entire stay. Huge expenses. So what we did here is we went to a university college because it was a very big deployment of gear. So we were a bit nervous to go in a hotel. We went to a local college at our University of Queensland, and they have little manual heaters, and the students switch them on or off manually, right? We wired them up with two devices. One of them was measuring the electricity use continuously. It was a little smart plug. I will show you a picture later. And then the other thing was buttons that allowed to control. Now that's where it's the interactive thing. So the PowerPoint allows me to measure it, but it also is a receiver. So if I push the button, it tells the PowerPoint what to do. So we wired up a bunch of rooms. The purple rooms were wired up on a timer. So you press the button, the heater runs for 2 hours, and then it switches off. The golden rooms were on two buttons, on, off. So that was the same mode of operation the students were used to. Yeah? And now you can see the distribution of energy use across rooms, and you can see that the purple rooms are dramatically lower than the golden rooms. In fact, that's a 60% reduction in electricity use. A total game changer for that college, because colleges are not very rich in Australia. So immediately everything was changed over to the buttons. One single student complained, and we bought them a Duna, right? They were cold at night, all right. For the others, we even offered them. We said, are you annoyed by the timer? Would you like us to reprogram your buttons? Not a single other student asked for it. So again, no impact. In fact, the students agreed. They said, well, sometimes we just go to lectures all day and we forget to switch the heater on. So the timer was quite handy because we couldn't forget. Yeah? So here's where technology works both ways, and that's really where we can get the most value. In a perfect world, that doesn't exist, but that's my dream. We had a business that's completely wired up, where we have everything measured continuously in both directions. Measure, control, measure, control. And I'll just show you a few of the devices. That'll be real quick, but that's the core of our system. It's a gateway, so all the devices talk to this thing, and then this thing sends the data to us. The technology we use is LoRaWAN, so that's very low energy devices. So if you look at this water meter, that's installed at a pipe, and the battery lasts for 16 years. All right? So no environmental harm done by those devices. This is an electricity meter that goes in the main switchboard. These are the little PowerPoint meters we used for the heaters. So literally you plug the heater in this, and then you plug this device into the PowerPoint, and it's a sender and a receiver. This is all sorts of temperature, humidity, even CO2 measurements that you could measure the risk of COVID in a hotel if you wanted to. And the buttons at the bottom are the ones we used for our heater study. Oh, this is a little toy I like particularly. It's a contact switch. It just shows you if a door opens or not. Because another little problem I have is in minibars. So I've been to hotels in Australia with 300 rooms, and every single room has an underbench fridge that you would find in a city apartment, right? And all these fridges, 300 of them, run every day, all year. It's just absolutely insane. So we're currently measuring the electricity use of minibars, and that little contact switch allows us to see how often guests use it. And my hope is that we will find that there's entire market segments never using the fridge. So maybe we can have different room types, where we say, well, if you're not going to use the fridge, why should we be running it all the time, right? But that's work in progress. I have no data. It's just I like the switch. I wanted to show you the switch. All right, and that's our plate-wise system. That's maybe the most sophisticated thing we've done. So that's the type of thing Oscar deployed in the Chinese hotel. You can see at the bottom is the floor scale, and that's industrial. You can hose it off. The bin goes on the scale, and the little white box behind the bin is our transmitter. You can see the inside live. My engineer said you have to show them the inside. So there you go. That is the inside of the box. And that's the scale. And then on top you can see the people counter. So the white box counts the people who go into the dining room. And then we have a satisfaction stand. We always try to capture satisfaction in the dining room, because whatever intervention we launch, we never ever want to see a drop in satisfaction. So that's just our control point to make sure we aren't impacting negatively on satisfaction. All right, so that's the gear, and then what works best? So now you've heard about all these different experiments, and I hope I showed you that they are informed by very different theories. So I thought I'd wrap it up by giving you, because now, like literally hot off the press, I can give you results on what works best. A few years ago, that was my hypothesis. I argued that beliefs, so when we talk to people about the environment, is not going to work. And all the experiments we've done seem to show that. It just doesn't work. We're in the wrong context. We're in the enjoyment business. People are just not receptive for that kind of communication. Then I was assuming that social norms would be better than beliefs. So whenever we were appealing at the role of a human within their community or peer pressure, then I argue enjoyment, and that's, I think, the one that's been totally neglected. Nobody's thinking about enjoyment within our enjoyment industry. And I think it's the most powerful driver. If we can make the correct behavior, the sustainable behavior, the most enjoyable one, it's just going to happen automatically. And then choice architecture, whenever we change the decision environment, I was hypothesizing would be the most effective. And ever since I made those predictions, there were two interesting studies. One was a literature review, and one just accepted recently is a meta-analysis. And I'll just show you the results because they're really quite interesting. So this is the literature review. And what you see along the x-axis is the different theoretical frameworks. And what you see plotted is the number of studies that have been conducted using all these theoretical bases. And you can immediately see beliefs. Everyone does beliefs, right? We all produce science where we tell people about the environment, and then we assume that's going to change the behavior. But what you can also see, the red is where it's unsuccessful, the green is where it's successful. You can see that the beliefs only have a success rate of 58%. That's not glamorous, and that's only the ones that were published. You can imagine how many unsuccessful ones never made it through to publication. If you combine beliefs with social norms, you're even worse off. It's only 47% success rate. But then you look at nudging or choice architecture, and you see how few studies we've run using that mechanism. But then you see the success rate is 82% when we do it. And enjoyment is even better. Nobody does it. Nobody leverages enjoyment for behavioral change. But when we do it, it's got a 100% strike rate. I know, 100% doesn't mean much if it's 100% of 2 or 3. But still, right? I mean, this is a whole area of theory that we've been neglecting today. All right, and this is just accepted for publication in JTR, so literally not published yet, but very cool. This is a meta-analysis. So meta-analyses are more powerful than literature reviews because they compare, in this case across 54 studies, the effect sizes. So they compare how these studies were conducted and extract the actual effectiveness of every single approach. And you can see here, choice architecture is hands down the winner. So if ever we are able to change choice architecture, that'll always be the most successful intervention. Enjoyment is the next best, so that is really something we should put more effort into. To my great surprise, beliefs comes out third, so my prediction's wrong. Beliefs outperformed social norms in this meta-analysis, and at the bottom you see penalties obviously just don't work in tourism. That's not altogether surprising. And one last slide to take away, and you don't need to read anything. I just want you to enjoy the color coding here. So along the rows, you can see the different behaviors that tourists can engage in that have environmental consequences. And along the columns, you can see our theoretical constructs. And we're not going to read them, but all you're going to look at is the green is where we've done a lot of research. You can barely find the green area, right? The yellow area is where we've done a little bit, and the red area is where we've done nothing. Yeah? So I think that is really where we want to, I mean, it just shows you how much more we can do, right? And if we do it with good technology and with field experimentation, that the red area is our future impact, and we can make that impact. And that brings me to my conclusions. Sustainable tourism is very much a work in progress, although there's a lot of statements in annual reports. Really, there's not much action yet in terms of making real improvements. We need more theory-informed practical measures. We need more automatic measurement, because as Lord Kelvin famously said, if you can't measure it, you can't change it. We must learn to measure these things. And there's more pressure. All of you who know the European Union legislation, they've just put out a directive. All big companies by January 24, they must measure it. They must be able to report it. Everyone's in panic mode because the banks are not going to give you money unless you're complying with that directive. So big panic. We need to measure, we need to measure. And the UN SDGs have a specific target saying we must measure environmental sustainability in tourism. So, last point, this I hope you see is truly collaboration. That's why it's so great to present at TTRA. None of this work can happen with academics only, and none of this work can happen with industry only. It is truly a collaborative effort. We love working with industry. All of the colleagues I know who do this kind of research love working with industry. So team up. If you're industry, talk to academics. If you're academics, talk to industry. It's just together that we can push all of this forward. Thank you very much. That's it from me.